The following video was heavily inspired by YouTuber Hills Alive, specifically her Joanna Lannister video, link in the description box below. The trope of a woman who is so good and so pure that she manages to change the cold heart of a complete shithead is everywhere in fiction, but it doesn't feel very true to life either. I absolutely love this line from Hills Alive because not only is it accurate, it made me realize just how misogynistic this trope is. It's a perfect victim-blaming tool. If an abusive male partner doesn't change his ways, then it's the woman's fault because she literally wasn't good enough. That being said, I was so used to this trope, I automatically assumed this was George R.R. Martin's intention when he wrote Joanna Lannister, the mysterious wife of Tywin Lannister. But that's not the kind of author George R.R. Martin is. He turns unrealistic tropes on their heads. Now we, the audience, never get a first-hand account of who Joanna really was since she died decades before the series started while giving birth to Tyrion. Even Joanna's relatives never talk about who she was as a person. 9 times out of 10, the snippets we do get from the characters are regarding the effect she had on Tywin while she was alive and after she died. The most telling one is this. Lord Tywin seldom spoke of his wife, but Tyrion had heard his uncles talk of the love between them. In those days, his father had been Aerys' hand, and many people said that Lord Tywin Lannister ruled the 7 kingdoms, but Lady Joanna ruled Lord Tywin. Tywin loved and trusted Joanna so much that she was his #1 counselor. He respected her to the point that when Aerys Targaryen publicly mocked her for nursing her children, he attempted to resign his hand the next morning. And any kindness, any joy Tywin had died when she did. So many fans, myself included, assumed Joanna was Tywin's moral compass. She seemed to bring out humanity in him that he never revealed to anyone else, so it wasn't illogical to assume that. Her assumed kindness and decency also make her death all the more tragic. Had she lived, she may have been able to steer her family away from villainy. But here's the truth. Joanna's assumed decency is just a red herring, and a very clever one at that. The truth about her actual character is actually hinted throughout the books and lore of A Song of Ice and Fire. According to Grand Maester Pycelle, only Lady Joanna truly knows the man beneath the armor, and all his smiles belong to her and her alone. I do avow that I have even observed her make him laugh, not once, but on 3 separate occasions. Okay, we need to establish something very important. Tywin Lannister loathes laughter. He can't stand it. When he was growing up, his father, Tytos Lannister, was dubbed the Laughing Lion because he was so jovial and weak. Even when lowly pages and squires would insult him to his face, Tytos would literally laugh away the insults. In fact, he would laugh the loudest of all. When his vassals learned what a spineless enabler he was, they would demand loans from him and refuse to pay them back, knowing they wouldn't have to. Tytos was so spineless that he married his only daughter Jenna to a second son of Walder Frey just to please him. In short, House Lannister was a joke during Tytos' reign, hence Tywin's hatred of laughter as he learned to associate it not with joy but with mockery and contempt. But he felt safe laughing in front of Joanna. 3 times. In the vicinity of a Grand Maester. We all just assumed Joanna was the most decent of her family, but what is Tywin's attitude toward kindness and decency? He hates it as much as he hates laughter. His father took kindness and decency to the extreme and it nearly destroyed their house. Tywin Lannister is ruthless, arrogant, elitist, sadistic, and he does not let people in his inner circle just because they love and respect him. Because the truth is, a lot of people do love and respect him, and that by itself means less than nothing to him. He keeps people close based on how useful they are, how they can give him power, how they can make him look good, and how much they can validate his ego. After Joanna died, his younger brother Kevin took over as his chief counselor. And yes, Kevin is smart and level-headed, but he was also utterly subservient to his brother, never questioning him. Jenna mentions that she was once Tywin's princess, but a disagreement caused her to be cast aside. Tywin even cares nothing for the personal happiness of his own children. They're all tools to further his ambition, or in Tyrion's case, a punching bag. He expects his children to marry whoever he wants them to marry, when he himself married for love, and within his own family at that. Remember, Joanna was Tywin's first cousin. Even though Tywin rarely shows emotion, it needs to be emphasized just how much sadism is an intrinsic part of his personality. He particularly loves humiliating his enemies since he himself fears humiliation above all else. And his so-called brilliant military tactics amount to nothing more than using overwhelming force and then resorting to violating one of the most sacred laws in Westeros because a teenage boy kept kicking his ass. So, what kind of woman would Tywin not only be hopelessly in love with, but would feel safe laughing in front of, and implicitly trust her counsel to the point where she ruled him? Would it be a woman who let basic human decency get in the way of Lannister ambition? Or would it be a cold, ruthlessly intelligent sadist who would do anything to further Lannister power and influence while gleefully crushing anyone even perceived as an enemy? My money's on the latter. Hills Alive theorizes that Tywin loved Joanna and only Joanna because she met his standards of what Lannister should be to a T. Her beauty was exceptional to the point where Aerys Targaryen himself had a chronic obsession with her. And keep in mind, Aerys had many mistresses that usually lasted between a few weeks to half a year. She was definitely more intelligent than Tywin because if she truly ruled him like so many say, then a lot of Tywin's decisions were made courtesy of her counsel. A canon example of Joanna's intelligence was her ability to cultivate alliances. Before Tywin became Hand of the King, Joanna had been serving as a lady-in-waiting to Princess, later Queen Rhaella. Granted, she went back to Casterly Rock soon after Tywin became Hand because Rhaella disapproved of her brother/husband perving on her companions, but Joanna managed to secure a strong enough alliance with the current Princess of Dorne that they planned to marry their children to each other. Jaime would marry Elia and Cersei would marry Oberyn. Why would Joanna want such an alliance? Well, which kingdom managed to remain independent from Targaryen rule for more than a century even when they had dragons? That's right, Dorne. In some ways, an even better example of Joanna's intelligence would be her ability to make someone who loathes laughter actually laugh. Joanna would also have to take elitism and sadism to the extreme in order for someone like Tywin to be so enthralled with her. To Tywin, nothing matters more than image. He would not love and trust a woman who didn't prioritize the importance of the Lannister family being seen as the most powerful and feared in all of Westeros. He also would never love or respect a woman who didn't enjoy eliminating enemies in the most degrading way possible. There are no reports of Joanna being outwardly sadistic, but she wouldn't be. Westeros is an extremely misogynistic society, and for a woman, cruel is often synonymous with crazy. This could be the reason why Joanna also loved Tywin. He was the only one she could reveal her monstrous side to while still being valued for her intelligence and capabilities. In fact, someone like Tywin would believe her sadism only made her more cunning and capable. Tywin could feel safe expressing positive emotions in front of Joanna, while Joanna could feel safe expressing her love of cruelty to Tywin. No wonder they were a match made in hell. Because Joanna exceeded Tywin's expectations as much as she validated him as a person, she was the only exception to Tywin's misogyny and seemed to lessen it somewhat when she was alive. It's implied that before Joanna died, Tywin somewhat doted on Cersei and even confided in her his plan to marry her to Prince Rhaegar. But after Joanna died, he gave up educating his only daughter, whom he wanted to become Queen of the Seven Kingdoms because the only woman who validated him was dead. Never mind that Cersei could have cultivated alliances like her mother did. No, it was good enough for her to just pop out babies. Even worse, Tywin knew that Robert Baratheon would be a terrible king. He even outright called him stupid. So Tywin knew from the start that his grandchildren, the new royal heirs, were going to be raised by a stupid man and an uneducated woman. And this is the character that so many fans praise as a brilliant, pragmatic Machiavellian. But Tywin wasn't the brilliant, pragmatic Machiavellian. Joanna was. When other Lannisters comment that the best part of Tywin died when she did, they mean the tempered part, not the humane part. If Tywin was practical, it was because of Joanna's influence, and his neglect of educating Cersei is only the beginning. Right after Joanna's death, the Princess of Dorne, along with young Elia and Oberyn, visited Casterly Rock in order to secure the discussed marriage pact between their children. But when they arrived, what did Tywin do? He told them that Cersei was meant for Prince Rhaegar and offered the infant dwarf Tyrion to Elia instead. Jesus Christ, Tywin, your wife spent years cultivating an alliance with Dorne and you just couldn't wait to undo all her hard work. At the very least, he could have politely refused them, but instead he deliberately insulted them. A powerful alliance gone in an instant because Tywin lost something and wanted to throw a tantrum. It's because of this that I re-examined his relationship with Aerys Targaryen. For the first 10 years, it was highly profitable on both sides. In fact, according to A World of Ice and Fire, Aerys did pretty much whatever Tywin told him to do during that first decade. But then rumors started cropping up that Tywin was the true ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and Aerys was just a figurehead. The rumors infuriated Aerys to the point where he would ignore Tywin's advice out of sheer spite and soon took immense pleasure in publicly humiliating him. On the surface, surface, this would be one of the rare circumstances where you would actually sympathize with Tywin. Kevin even says to Tyrion that Tywin was so good at his job and all it earned him was a Mad King's envy, and considering what Aerys eventually became, it's easy to dismiss him as a vindictive, jealous maniac. But ask yourself this: do you think Tywin did anything to dispel these rumors? I mean, that's what a pragmatic Machiavellian would have done. It doesn't matter if the rumors were true. It doesn't matter if Tywin was more capable than Aerys. Those rumors were a threat to the king's power, and what king would take that lying down? Aerys undoubtedly thought to himself, if Tywin is doing nothing about these rumors, then he must agree with them. He must be laughing at me along with everyone else, and worse, he could be plotting to take the Iron Throne from me. Tywin didn't put the rumors in their place, so Aerys ended up putting him in his place. When Tywin proposed that Cersei marry Prince Rhaegar, Aerys brutally cut him down. He said that while Tywin was a good and valuable servant, he was still just a servant. A pragmatic Machiavellian would have assured Aerys that the rumors were utter bullshit and would take pains to punish the ones who were spreading them. But Tywin refused to do that because he enjoyed the boost to his ego more than he valued the incredibly powerful but precarious position he was in. Was he really so stupid as to believe a king would take rumors like that lying down? That he would take his hand silently enjoying them lying down? That he would marry his heir to a lord who genuinely thought he was better than him? Yes, Tywin really is that stupid. But ironically, that particular instance of stupidity may have saved House Lannister. Even if Cersei had married Prince Rhaegar, do you really think she would have given Jaime up? Do you think she would have let him marry another woman? Hell no. She would have married Rhaegar and then made the same arrangements that she made in the original story to force Jaime into the Kingsguard. To say I don't have a good opinion of Rhaegar would be an understatement, but he is much sharper than Robert Baratheon and would have been much more likely to catch Cersei and Jaime together, and House Lannister would have died a laughingstock, which is Tywin's biggest fear. One of Tywin's biggest hypocrisies is his constant emphasis that nothing matters more than his family's legacy, but Tywin does not give a shit about legacy, and there is no better evidence than his refusal to marry again after Joanna died. One of his sons is a dwarf, and the other is in the Kingsguard. His daughter is queen, yes, and as far as Tywin knew, his grandson would inherit the Iron Throne. But what about Casterly Rock? That sure as shit isn't going to Tyrion. Tywin made that very clear in one of his Reason You Suck speeches. In the show, Tywin even admits that the gold mines have been dry for years. So why didn't he remarry? Because for all his blathering about family and practicality and securing their future, in his mind, he is House Lannister. He and he alone. Instead of gaining an alliance through marriage and producing more heirs, what does he do? Sleeps with prostitutes and gives them jewelry. His father cared more for the opinions of others than the dignity of his own family, and by the end of his life his only concern was sleeping with low-born women who utterly dominated him. His last mistress, a candlemaker's daughter, even wore his dead wife's jewels with Tydos' approval. Mimicking an abusive parent's habits is a common symptom of trauma victims, and yes, Tydos was abusive because neglect is abuse. If an abused child can't feel close to a parent through healthy means, they'll mimic destructive habits in an effort to feel close. Tywin thought taking elitism to the extreme would prevent him from becoming his father, but like Tydos, he sacrificed legacy for selfishness. Prioritizing his daddy trauma over his family's future is not the behavior of a pragmatic Machiavellian. House Lannister completely fell apart after Tywin died. Cersei descended into madness, addiction, and narcissism, and Kevin Lannister only returned to serve as Hand in Regent after Cersei was arrested, after Cersei's many screw-ups wreaked havoc on the kingdom. But I've realized over the years that we can't hold Cersei 100% responsible for that. While Kevin Lannister is level-headed and reasonable on the surface, he's also a deluded butt-boy who idealizes Tywin the same way a lot of Game of Thrones fans idealize him. Kevin has clear contempt for Cersei's so-called leadership abilities and scorns her for the way she raised Joffrey. And while Cersei should definitely be condemned for the way Joffrey turned out, it was also Robert's utter neglect and even abuse that contributed to Joffrey's monstrous disposition. Robert had as much interest in raising his children as he did in actually ruling the kingdom. That is, none. But Kevin conveniently overlooks this because drinking and whoring and prioritizing yourself, even when an entire realm of people are depending on you, All that's expected of men, while women are expected to not only pop out babies but be perfect parents even if their own parents are either dead like Joanna or shit like Tywin. Kevin also does not hold his brother accountable for neglecting Cersei's education. There's a lot to blame and hate Cersei for, but her lack of education was strictly Tywin's fault and a result of blatant misogyny. In fact, Tywin planned to have Cersei shipped off to Casterly Rock with a new husband, which Kevin wholeheartedly agreed with. In fact, let's examine the section in A Feast for Crows where Cersei asks Kevin to be Hand of the King. First, he complains to her that he's tired and wants to go back home, see his wife, mourn his son and brother, and assist Lancel. But when Cersei counters that Tommen and the realm need him, Kevin tells her that he will serve as King's Hand if Cersei gives up the regency to him and returns to Casterly Rock. Keep one thing in mind. Cersei outranks Kevin as both the Lady of Casterly Rock and Queen Regent. So he's basically saying to her, give up an incredibly powerful position because your inability to handle it is entirely the fault of your feeble, womanly mind. In fact, he outright tells her that she doesn't think, so she should just go and leave leadership to the ones who can actually think, that is, the men. Shit, even Robert never got that level of disrespect. And Cersei, in the first 3 books at least, was much smarter than Robert. Seriously, how many people can arrange for the assassination of a king along with an airtight alibi for themselves? Yes, Robert was rightfully called lazy, incompetent, a bad king, and even stupid, but no one ever said that he was completely incapable of thinking. Kevin does give her sound advice, but in the most condescending, disrespectful way possible. By the end, he says, "That is my counsel. Take it or no. You may make Moonboy your hand for all I care. My brother is dead, woman. I am going to take him home." Cersei protests that he's abandoning Tommen, and what does Kevin say? Tommen has his mother. A minute ago you said Cersei was a terrible mother. And here's a snippet of Kevin's thoughts in A Dance with Dragons after Cersei's walk of shame. The golden child had grown into a vain, foolish, greedy woman. Left to rule, she would have ruined Tommen as she had Joffrey. As evil and entitled as Cersei is, you can't deny that when she asked him to become Hand of the King, Kevin deliberately fucked with her just because he could, and just because she's a woman. If you compare Tywin's stupidity and Cersei's stupidity, there's really not that much of a difference between the two. Here are some of Cersei's stupid decisions. 1. Cersei named Orain Waters as Master of Ships just because he resembles Rhaegar, and when she's arrested, he takes off with the royal fleet to become a pirate. 2. She armed the Faith militant in an effort to relieve some of the crown's debts, completely oblivious to the fact that their first loyalty is to their fanatical dogma. This leads to her own imprisonment and her walk of shame. 3. She pretty much tells the Iron Bank to go screw themselves when they come to collect, which causes economic chaos throughout the Seven Kingdoms when the Iron Bank calls in all their debts and refuses new loans. And now Stannis Baratheon has a new ally in them. Now compare this to Tywin's stupidity. 1. He refused to quash rumors that cost him an incredibly powerful position and alliance because he enjoyed the ego boost they gave him. 2. He went out of his way to destroy the Lannister alliance with Dorne because he lost Joanna and wanted to insult someone powerful solely out of spiteful satisfaction. Later, he earned the undying hatred of Dorne when Princess Elia and her children were murdered in the most brutal way possible by his soldiers. A pragmatic Machiavellian would have killed the children to secure Robert Baratheon's throne, but would also have spared Princess Elia and sent her back to Dorne. Tywin may not have outright ordered Elia's rape, but he knew it was going to happen. It's Gregor Clegane, for God's sake. Oberyn was right. Tywin did want revenge on Elia for marrying Prince Rhaegar instead of Cersei. 3. Tywin refused to marry and produce more heirs because when Tywin Lannister loses something, the world must revolve around that loss. 4. He refused to educate Cersei and just assumed her children would be proper heirs to the Iron Throne merely because they have Lannister blood. 5. He believes he can hold the North, the fucking North, after murdering the royal family through violation of one of the most sacred laws in Westeros, because he sucked as a military tactician and was only interested in being seen as scary and powerful. The inevitable consequences for this were just white noise to him. 6. He married Sansa to Tyrion so a Lannister can be heir to Winterfell. Yeah, for a week, until he's assassinated by the many vengeful Northerners who would be beside themselves with glee to kill not only a Lannister, but a Lannister who presumed to rule them. Hills Alive believes that Tywin's main motivation for marrying Sansa to Tyrion was to humiliate the last Stark heir, and I wholeheartedly agree. In the show, Tywin supposedly sums up Cersei in 2 sentences. I don't distrust you because you're a woman. I distrust you because you're not as smart as you think you are. But neither is Tywin. I thought this was a badass takedown the first time I heard it too, but with the passage of time, I'm able to see that the show has misogyny that the books lack. Cersei is condemned more for her mistakes and crimes because she's a woman. Had she been the one to push Bran from that tower, fans would have hated her far more than Jaime. Like Tywin, like any Lannister I should say, Kevin only does what's convenient for himself. He refused to serve as Hand of the King unless Cersei stepped down as regent. I mean, what was he going to do, guide Cersei into being a good leader like Tywin should have done? Hell no. It's not like Joffrey and Tywin are dead. It's not like Tyrion is a kinslayer and a fugitive. It's not like Jaime lost his hand. It's not like House Lannister is in an incredibly vulnerable position and they need to strengthen what few family members they have left. No, Cersei should have just been born a good leader and a good mother, and because she wasn't, Kevin isn't going to demean himself by working under her. He's just going to go back home until things get so dire he has no choice but to return. Note that all of this happens before Kevin finds out Cersei preyed on Lancel, which he immediately forgives her for when he finally does find out. Nice, Kevin. Your niece raping your son is more forgivable than her womanly shortcomings. You could make the argument that Cersei is now too far gone in her arrogance and entitlement to be properly taught leadership, and you'd be right, but that is not the reason why Kevin dismissed her. His disrespect and disregard were solely due to misogyny. Had Cersei been a man, he would have been far more forgiving of her mistakes and shortcomings. And let me be clear, I hate Cersei. Her atrocities and misogyny rival and often exceed the men she holds in such contempt. But that doesn't mean that men like Kevin don't get to be called out for perpetuating a destructive system because they think educating women is unnecessary and worse, beneath them. Getting back to Joanna, I believe she was the true Lannister mastermind, the pragmatic Machiavellian, and she encouraged Tywin to be one too. All hope for their family did die when she did because Tywin became consumed by his narcissism and prioritized himself over the future of his family. But to Joanna, the future of their family was everything. It's very interesting to note that while Tywin wanted Cersei to marry Prince Rhaegar, Joanna wanted her to marry Prince Oberyn, as in Joanna's goal was not the Iron Throne. Maybe that's because she knew that, as enticing as the Iron Throne is, marrying into the highly unstable Targaryen family could easily destroy their own family. She had personal experience with Aerys after all. Was this something she and Tywin clashed over? Before she died, did she try to persuade Tywin that the Iron Throne would be short-term gain for their family while Dorne would be long-term gain? Well, she would have been absolutely right. Even in the best-case scenario, even if Tywin quashed the rumors and Cersei married Prince Rhaegar, even if Jaime and Cersei hadn't been caught in their incest, Cersei would not have produced the heirs Rhaegar wanted. Remember, Rhaegar was consumed by the A Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. Like so many Targaryens before him, he believed he would produce the prince that was promised, the savior of all mankind. Even as Cersei had borne him a son and 2 daughters, the prophecy is a song of ice and fire, not a song of lion and fire. Rhaegar would have still seduced and run off with Lyanna Stark. Even if Jaime wasn't in the Kingsguard, Cersei would be in the Red Keep trapped with the Mad King. Hell, Tywin would be trapped there too because he would still be King's Hand. I can see Aerys burning Cersei and or Tywin while keeping the other as a hostage, but considering this is Aerys, it most likely would have been Tywin. In conclusion, had Joanna lived, she would not have been a loving parent, but she definitely would have been a pragmatic one, passing her talents on to her children. Cersei would have been a formidable politician, and Jaime would have learned to take things seriously. Tyrion would have most likely endured abuse and cruelty from her for being born a dwarf, but Joanna would have also taught him to talk less and listen more, since people are prone to underestimating dwarves. So no, the Lannister family would not have been better people under Joanna's influence. They would have been 1,000 times more dangerous. All hope for their family died when she died, and hope for the realm was restored. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and please like, comment, and subscribe to Hills Alive as well.